Imagine finally finding someone who loves you as you are. And after so many painful attempts to find love, this person is right by your side and wants to be with you. So what is it in traumatized people that the presence of someone this good can shut you down? That's not good for relationships, but the better things go, the more you feel numb and detached and like it's not even real. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Wendy, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm 26 with CPTSD, and I'm having issues connecting in my relationship. I grew up with an extremely emotionally and occasionally physically abusive mother who kidnapped me at the age of 7 from my father." Wow. The abuse would get so bad, at one point it became life-threatening. I spent most of my life with her until I was 14, suffering. My father tried to get me back, but custody is not always easy, and at 14 I advocated to live with my father the majority of the time, to the increased vitriol of my mother. When I moved in with my father, I also gained an emotionally cold and jealous stepmother who openly disliked me, which has left me with additional abandonment wounds from both her and even my father for not stepping in. In that same year, I lost a grandfather who was a longtime father figure to me. I was blessed, however, to find my best friend that same time too, and for the first time and only time in my life, I felt so seen and loved. With this friend, dealing with what had happened to me suddenly became possible. Unfortunately, he has since died due to his struggle with addiction in 2020. I've spent the last 18 years in therapy, and about the last 8 years of that really working on my CPTSD. In the last 3 years, I've really begun to flourish, and my life is so full and happy with friends and love and kindness. You wouldn't believe it, Anna. I'm believing you, Wendy. I believe you. And I'm so proud of where I am. I am even in school to become a marriage and family therapist, and I have a steady job, something I never thought possible for me. So rewind to last year, and I think I may have met the man of my dreams. This is not my first relationship. I've had many before, mostly bad, but this one is different. He's kind, he's caring, and loving in a way I've never experienced. He's the most honest man I know, and he is so much like me. He's not angry, and he gets me in a way I only ever had once before, with my dear friend who died in the past. I feel seen. I feel like I've met someone who loves the way I do, and he's helped me so much to grow. To be fair, it wasn't always perfect. We started off as friends with benefits. We realized early on we had a beautiful friendship, and I fell hard, except he was non-committal, so I cut it off with him in November, and we kept our friendship at a distance. But eventually, we realized we wanted to be with each other, and he asked me to be his girlfriend. And he's now fully committed, and I believe him, because the man speaks with his actions and not his words. And what an incredible change that is from my past. We began officially dating about 2 months ago, but here's the problem. I cannot help but feel wildly disconnected a good majority of the time. Yeah, it seems to ebb and flow. Like some days are good and some days are bad, but when it happens, it feels like my body and mind are somewhere else. And it hurts me because I love him so much, but I'm ashamed about what is happening. I plan to tell him soon and let him know what I've been feeling. I know he'll be understanding, but I don't know how to fix this. I've noted this seems to happen in our most intimate and kind moments. Whether it's loving sex or when he says something so sweet and kind that I don't even know what to do, and the feelings in me seem to become so overwhelming, I pull away to somewhere else where he cannot touch me. It feels like trauma is once again stealing away from me the most precious moments in my world. It's like my body is rejecting the love, and I do not know how to let it in. Can you please help me? I want to feel connected with my partner, and I'm afraid of losing something good. Wendy. All right, Wendy. I really understand you. And first of all, I'm really proud of you for your life coming together as you have. You had this very tough childhood, and here you are. You've been working on yourself. You have a career in place. You have a good job, and now you've met somebody really nice. Boy, are you not the first person with complex trauma to have trouble opening up to the love of a good person. And there is a way that you can increase the chances that you can handle this, that you can not screw it up and give yourself the time and space to let your feelings evolve. It's really normal to feel detached or even dissociated in the presence of love. And if you think about it, like, when did you have a chance to feel comfortable there? It's pretty intense. When somebody really loves you, what's different is when you've only been with unstable people, and it sounds like you may have been only with unstable people, there's kind of a built-in escape hatch. On some level, you know it can't work out. And so all of your own fear of commitment, all of your own fear of closeness and attachment and being accepted and potentially losing the other person, that's all undeveloped in you. You never really had to deal with that. I was surprised too when I got married to a good guy. It was kind of my first time somebody really was going to stay, and has. And I ended up having these weird, pulling away feelings. And I had no idea that was coming. I had spent so much of my life, if I just had the guy who really loved me, if we could just get married, everything would be great. And overall, in the long run, it is great, but boy, did I have a lot of adjusting to do. So I hear you. I think it's okay what's happening to you. Possibly it's a sign you're not into it, but you're right. This is a precious thing. You don't want to mess it up. And here's what you can do. So when you told me you've only been really dating for 2 months, and I know you've been friends for a long time, but you've been only dating for 2 months, I wondered if perhaps you've gotten very enmeshed already, maybe always staying together every night, always talking about the future. Sometimes what we need is to be Victorian about dating, to go very slowly, to not make assumptions about the future, and to go very carefully, both parties, with grand statements about, this is like the love of my life. This is the best thing that's ever happened. I've met the man of my dreams. To know if somebody's the person of our dreams takes about 2 years. And so sometimes we can really pressure the intimacy and the relationship by sort of declaring something, it's totally great, and the only right response to it is to go all in real fast, right? That is such a trauma person thing to do. And it feels right in the moment, and it feels like betrayal if you can't do it, and it's hard to pace yourself. It's hard to pace yourself, especially once sex is happening. It's very hard to pace the relationship, but it's so important that you do. Is that you pace your closeness, you pace your expectations. So for a lot of us, it's very hard to keep perspective on the pace of a relationship without artificial structure. So I teach this thing called structured dating. And even if a relationship has progressed to total enmeshment, all the time is together, you can take a step back very lovingly and reassuringly and not be living together and not be spending every night together, and maybe limiting, at this stage of the relationship, spending 2 or 3 evenings together. And one of those is like a weekend day, but it's not the whole weekend and it's not every day. You didn't tell me where you are with that, but I'm just going to tell you, this has been so helpful in my life, and it's what allowed me to have a good relationship. There's a lot of growing and adjustment that needs to happen for people to come together in a real way. It's a lot. And especially if they've already been through the ringer on a relationship or two, which you have. That's a lot to go through. That's a lot to go through, and there's trust issues, and what works out trust issues is not one conversation. It's the repeated experience day after day from hanging out and taking a little outing and going to the grocery store, and fixing a tire and having a problem and having an argument. And all of those things start to add up for your knowledge and grounded in reality kind of trust that you have in another person. And as that trust builds, then you may find that your kind of spiritual, physical, mental attraction to him begins to open up. There's a risk that it's not going to be there, that he's just a friend and you like the idea of the romance, and it's calling to you because he feels romantic feelings, so that there is that risk. And it will be sad for everybody if that's the case, but there's no really good way forward except to find out if you return these feelings. It's plenty of times that is what's true when the feelings are allowed to evolve. I really would like you to give yourself this chance. I think whatever comes of it is going to be very helpful to you to be able to relax in the courtship phase and resist the total enmeshment, grand, great love picture that we want to put on relationships sometimes. It takes time to get to know somebody, and that's what dating is for. Can you do it? I hope you can. For people who were neglected or abused as kids, dating can feel like a war zone. One kiss can activate emotional meltdown, and an actual date can open up attachment wounds that quickly overwhelm the whole getting to know you process with tears and panic and over-the-top anger and a desperation in the midst of all these reactions to hide what's happening from the new person in your life and control how they perceive it, because you know it's going to scare them away and would very likely lead to them leaving. Now, this extreme vulnerability is not your fault. It's probably coming from early abandonment experiences when you were small. And if you're like many of us with CPTSD, you were left on your own to understand it and manage it. People who don't have CPTSD, they don't get it. Their idea of what to do about these problems, when they see us freaking out about dating, they're like, why don't you talk about it? Why don't you take medication? I don't know what they say, but it doesn't really answer what the problem is, does it? It doesn't really stop it from happening again. And I want to talk about a different, more practical approach to it that might actually help. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Kati, and she writes, "Hey, crappy childhood fairy. Recently, I started dating again after being single for about 6 years. I felt good emotionally and spiritually. I talked to a few people here and there to get back in the swing of things, but didn't get into anything serious. I ended up quitting my job in a major city where I was doing really well and coming back to my hometown to stay with my sister for a few months. I feel like I connect with people here better. I was craving connection so badly, and I was having a hard time meeting people in the big city." Okay, I got my pencil here. I'm going to be circling things, Kati, so I'll read your letter all the way through and I'll come back and comment on some things that I circle here. All right. "I ended up meeting a guy who I had talked to on Facebook for a few months. I told him I was in town and we made plans to hang out. He was really nice and respectful, not like any of the guys I'd been with before. And I felt a very strong connection with him. We liked the same music, we laughed at the same things, and the date went really smoothly. By the end of the date, he kissed me, which I thought was moving a little too fast, but since I hadn't kissed anyone in many years, I got a little swept away. I didn't even know if he was the one I wanted to be with, and I wanted to take things slow, which I thought was showing what a mature state of mind I was in and how much I had grown since being single. He is 31, and I'm 29 now, by the way. I ended up allowing myself to start thinking about him, fantasizing and replaying the kiss over and over. I started stalking his social media and just let myself go off the deep end. I knew a nice, normal guy like him would not want to be with somebody like that, but I couldn't help it. Even writing this brings so much shame and regret of how I acted. I tried to act laid back, like I didn't care, and I even looked up his zodiac sign to see what kind of girls he likes. We actually have the same birthday, which of course I thought was some sign or something. He started to notice something was off, even through texts. Before I kissed him and on Facebook, I was just acting like my normal, confident self, which he was obviously attracted to. But now, I didn't know how to act. A lot of my CPTSD symptoms were coming up. I was able to spot a few of them, like wondering if he was talking to other girls, and I was able to let that go. I was also able to realize he wasn't going to be obsessed with or fall in love with me until he got to know me, which required time and respect. I've dated many narcissists in the past who love-bombed me, and I really had to recognize that this is not part of a normal, healthy relationship. This guy, on the other hand, didn't text me 24/7, but I found myself wanting to talk to him all the time, so again, I forced myself to back off a little bit. We got into a fight because he said I was acting strange. So the next day I got drunk and I asked him to come over, and we went to his place and he drank also. We ended up doing things. I did not sleep with him, but we did other things. Of course, the drinking mixed with the other things made me feel like I was in love with him. I ended up freaking out during it and told him I hated him and told him to take me home. He was very upset and told me not to contact him anymore. He blocked me on Facebook, and then on his way home after dropping me off, I called him and he said that our energies are different. And I'm sorry that I led you on. He also said, I'm just thinking like a guy now, which probably means he's just interested in sex
and has no respect for me anymore. It's been a week and I feel like I have lost myself. I can't stop thinking about him and stalking his social media. I literally feel heartbroken, and the feeling of rejection has reopened traumatizing wounds. I'm starting to have panic attacks in the middle of the night. I have so much regret for even coming here in the first place. I haven't contacted him, and I blocked his number, and I asked him to block me as well. I ended up messaging him asking if he blocked me yet, and he has not. I decided to completely stop drinking and try to get back to a good headspace, but I feel like I got so knocked off course, part of me wants to give up. I can't take this feeling of obsessing over him and thinking that I could finally be with a nice person just to go through the same things that made me stop dating in the first place. Please, any advice would mean so much to me. Thank you, Kati. All right, Kati. Yes, okay, I have some suggestions for you. So I go through your letter, and you do mention that you have CPTSD. I don't know what happened, but I can imagine. Your vibe to me feels like somebody who was not only neglected and not seen as a person, but maybe sexually abused, just because, you know, anything related to sex is so triggering. It just seems like there's something there. But I don't know. You didn't tell me, but that's the feeling. That's how it's reading to me based on, you know, just knowing people. You were craving connection so badly when you moved home, and you quit a job. It sounds like, you know, you had moved your life in a positive direction, maybe going to the city, but it was so lonely. And, you know, after this whole pandemic, you know, I just don't fault anybody for making major moves to try to sort out life and be more connected to people. So you were going to live with your sister, and you ended up meeting a guy. You were talking on Facebook for a few months, and you told him you were in town, and you hung out, and he was nice and he was respectful. Yay. And you felt a strong connection with him, and you liked the same music, and you laughed, and things were good. And then at the end of the date, he kissed you, and you went ahead and, I guess, kissed him back or allowed him to kiss you, and you didn't feel right about it. Okay. So I don't think it's crazy for a guy to try to kiss somebody who he had a nice date with. That's not weird. It's not what you wanted. It's not clear to me, you know, maybe you didn't signal in any way that you weren't receptive. So I know what you mean. Assuming you just sort of went along with it because you don't want to, I don't know, hurt somebody's feelings, or you're not sure how you feel yet. So no harm, no foul there. But after that, it kicked off an obsession for you. Okay, I know what that's like. So you ended up allowing yourself to think about him, fantasizing, replaying the kiss over and over, and you started stalking his social media. So, you know, right there, I just want to tell you what you already know, but I just want to say it out loud for you. Yes, something old got activated in you. And anybody who meets somebody they really like, they're going to feel excited about it, you know, and it's not like the weirdest thing to go, I don't know, let's see what they've got on Facebook or Instagram about themselves. You know, it's like checking it out is not the same as stalking them, but I get what you're saying, that the energy of how you were doing this is he became like the total focus of your life, right? That's the obsessive energy. So, and then there's all this shame. You knew that a nice, normal guy wouldn't want to be with somebody who got so obsessed like that. So you were judging yourself. You were like, see, I'm unworthy. You went to the unworthy place, even though, look, he's not going to know that you were looking at his social media. And a lot of people advise, if you're going to date somebody, you know, you might want to look at their social media so you can learn a little bit about them. It's a way to do that. It's not the same as stalking. So then you tried to act laid back and like you didn't care, right? So here at Crappy Childhood Fairy, we call that trying to pretend you're the cool girl. I'm the cool girl. I'm laid back. I don't care. I don't have a lot of emotions about the fact that we're getting involved and that I have a big crush on you. It's just, you know what? You don't have to do that. You don't have to be cool. It's okay to be kind of nerdy about romance when you like somebody. I hear you. It in you, especially with whatever happened in the past, it just takes on these huge proportions. But I want to put in front of you, there is a way to like take that intensity and funnel it into something that is not the guy and not communication with him. And then prepare yourself to spend time with him in a very structured manner, not too much. Definitely postpone anything sexual so that you can get to know him. The more you can get to know somebody, the less likely it is that you're going to leap into that like extreme limerence of just like, oh, they're just like the biggest thing that ever happened. Limerence can only happen when you don't actually know somebody. So it really gets in the way of getting to know somebody, which is what ordinary dating and actually having a relationship requires. So you are correctly sensing that there's a reaction in you that's obstructing the normal process where you would have found out, like, is he actually a good match for you? You tried to act laid back, and you looked at his zodiac sign to see what kind of girls he likes. But of course, he likes girls like you. That's what you know so far. He came for you. You can't use astrology to know what somebody likes. That's just not, it's just not real. Trying to use zodiac stuff or tarot or anything, that's what limerent people do. It's like, I don't like the answer I'm getting from reality. Let's see if somebody will give me, a different answer that's like magical and justifies my obsession. So I would really encourage you, just stay away from all that stuff. If you have this wound that you get limerent and it's blocking you from having real relationships, not being able to date for 6 years when you're 29, ouch. If your heart's desire is to have, a mate, then yeah, it's time to date. It's time to do this. He started to notice something was weird from your texts. So here goes the shame for you. Before you kissed him, and on Facebook, you were just acting like your normal self, and that's who he was attracted to. Yay, so you're in there. The real you is in there before the limerence kicked in. And the symptoms were kicking up, and it was stuff like you were wondering if he was talking to other girls. So like getting really, probably if you went on one date with somebody and they're online and dating and stuff, yeah, they're talking to other girls. So, it's not an exclusive thing. And I think when you really like somebody, it is kind of hard to deal with that. And you don't actually have to date in that way where you continue to see somebody when you can decide to date one person at a time and let people who are also interested in that come to you with it. You get to have standards about that. And believe me, when you have standards and boundaries and you set your own expectations of what works for you, it's going to like give off this vibe that people respect so much more than what happens with CPTSD when we lose that boundary and we get limerent. It's just like, oh, I'll take whatever I can get. No, yeah, whatever you like, whatever you want to do, that's what I want. It's a sure way to lose somebody's, interest in you is to be that way. You're right. It's like that. But what are you going to do? We got CPTSD. So we work on it together. Okay. We name it, we learn to calm it, and we get support from other people to help us kind of manage the path towards love. You are still included in this world. Okay, Kati, you are still part of it. You still get to look for love. You still get to go on dates, but it's just going to take some structure. You said a guy like him, he's not going to get obsessed or fall in love. So just a cautionary tale. You don't actually know him yet. For all you know, he's also an obsessive type, and it's a mystery. You're trying to interpret stuff that he says, but everybody in the early stages, they're putting their best foot forward. They're hiding what they feel embarrassed about. Everybody has stuff. So don't think he's so perfect and ahead of you or anything. I do understand, though, that he pulled away when he did. So he didn't text you 24/7, but you found yourself wanting to talk. You forced yourself to back off. That's right. That's how you set a boundary with yourself. But you got in a fight because he said you were acting strange. So the next day, you got drunk and asked him to come over. All right, right here, this was a big red flag here, Kati. You had an argument with him because you were acting weird. So rather than back off or try to talk about it, you got drunk and asked him to come over, which to me sounds like trying to make sex happen. And that's, to a person with no boundaries, that's what sex is for. It's like, things are getting difficult. I know. I'll just Band-Aid it all over with sex. And then he'll be interested, and that's all the relationship will be about, and we can stop focusing on how I'm struggling. And there's also this, like, fantasy that if there's sex, I'll calm down. This thing that I want, that's not how it works, is it though? If you didn't actually go all the way with him, but it sounds like you fooled around, and that's all it takes. Getting sexual with somebody, if you have abandonment wounds, which clearly you do from what you're describing, it's going to lock you in to a situation that you don't have the tools yet to handle. I would just strongly recommend that you have a delay boundary, that you put a big delay on getting sexual with anybody, that you have a real relationship with them, so that when things eventually one day do become sexual, it's hard for you, it's triggering for you. This person is like with you. They know that you struggle with this stuff. They are prepared to be supportive of you. You are worth it to them. Rather than you being this little tiny, peeled grape, out in the world, just trying to like pretend that you're tough as a rock. You're not. You don't have to be tough. You get to protect yourself. It's normal and okay, to stay away from these things that are so triggering for a person with CPTSD. So you saw what happened. The other thing I'm going to suggest to you, Kati, this thing where you said you quit drinking, yes. I've been talking about this more. If alcohol mixes with your CPTSD and results in behavior that makes you ashamed, it's time to stop drinking. It's time to let it go. If you have a desire to stop, guess what? You get to go to one of the most wonderful things in the world, which is AA. And I'm not an alcoholic, but I've gone to hundreds of open meetings because I absolutely love AA meetings. I relate to the alcoholics in the sort of intense life or death problems that they experience. That's how CPTSD is for me. I relate a lot. I used to wish, I wish it were just like, oh, if I stopped drinking, I would stop having this problem. But even alcoholics, stopping drinking isn't the end of the road. It's, there's so much healing that goes on that is only can be made possible in sobriety. Learning to live physiologically sober off of alcohol, emotionally sober off of a crutch designed to sort of blow everything out of the water and make everything, just change the channel with sex or drunkenness or something. Emotional sobriety. All right. Emotional sobriety is so important to a person who loses her or his boundaries when they try to date. Okay. You can do this. So you freaked out in the middle of fooling around with him and told him you hated him, and you demanded he take you home, and he was very upset. Well, yeah. So that's pretty extreme behavior. So, okay, let's chalk it up to CPTSD and alcohol and some pretty bad trauma wounds there. Some people, this type of behavior, this sort of like, I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, it goes on and on and on and on. I'm going to really urge you, do everything you can to support yourself in not becoming one of those people. Don't let this go on and on. Arrest it. Arrest it by getting sober. And I'm going to suggest you go to a 12-step fellowship if it's not AA, or maybe in addition to AA, sex and love addicts, where you're with other women who can be your friends, who can support you in drawing boundaries and getting clear-headed about, what is a proper way to date? What's a way that somebody who needs to use care around her emotions and her boundaries, how does she date? All right, that's where you can learn it. And it's free, and you have friends who are, you can always call and go, I don't know what to do about this text. I feel like I have to get back to him. And your friends can go, no, don't text him, right? We all need those friends. And not the ones who are still in the crazy and go like, oh, text him, tell him he's an asshole, do whatever. You don't want those friends' input. You want the input of people who are working on their emotional and physical sobriety. He said don't contact him anymore, and he blocked you on Facebook, and then on his way home after dropping you off, you called him and he tried to talk about it again. Poor thing. Your behavior went out and pushed him away, and you were still hoping you could save the day. But, by then even calling him, it's too late, right? The stuff that he said, I just wouldn't think too much about what it means. I think that when somebody's in that situation, that somebody's kind of flipping out on them and they don't know them, they say whatever they need to say to have a boundary and get out of the situation. And it sounds like he maybe wasn't trying to hurt you about it. When he says, I'm just thinking like a guy now, I don't know what that means. It doesn't matter. You're not going to see him again, okay? He was attractive, and it's really cool that when you're not triggered, you can attract somebody who you like, right? Progress. But he's not the only fish in the sea, luckily. So it's been a week and you feel like you've lost yourself. You are describing abandonment, Melange. You have not lost yourself. You met this guy, you went on one date. I'm just reasoning with you. You haven't lost your life. It doesn't mean that your whole move back to your hometown is ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything. It just means you still have a trauma wound and you tried dating and you got some more information that you need to support yourself in a much stronger way, that your trauma wounds are affecting you now. And if you're serious about moving forward with your life in a way that you can have a good relationship, you know what to do now, right? I haven't contacted him. I blocked his number. I asked him to block me. Then I messaged him to ask him if he blocked me yet, and he hadn't. So stop worrying about this blocking. It's not the blocking. It's that you need to stop contacting him 100% forever. No contact. It doesn't matter if he blocks you. Don't contact him. Stop thinking about him. Stop thinking about the guy. People always go like, how am I supposed to do that? It's like you have to catch yourself. If you're serious about trying to get over somebody that you're obsessed with, one of the things you have to do, stop talking about them, stop thinking about them. Now, I teach people this daily practice technique, and this is so helpful. And I have had to deal with similar situations. And my daily practice is something I do twice a day. But when you're obsessing about somebody, you have 2 chances a day in the daily practice, or more if you need them, to put your focus on those feelings about it. And you do it in the daily practice in this writing technique. And then after that, if you have a buddy or a 12-step sponsor, you can read what you wrote. But beyond that, no talking about it, no thinking about it. Stop entertaining the problem. If this were a drug addiction, you wouldn't want to just sit there and go, well, I'm just going to buy drugs and carry them in my pocket. And I'm going to take them out and I'm going to look at them. No. You get them out of your life, and the people who are associated with that, you also change that in your life. You have a big opportunity to change so many things about your life, but it sounds like you're just waking up right now about what's actually going on and how serious the trauma is. And it is, I had the same thing. And I remember thinking, I wish I didn't have this thing that I have to do all this stuff about. I just want to, go along and have fun like everybody else. But learning, healing, learning how to live as my real self, I have fun. And I have at least as much fun as some of the people I used to compare myself to. Like actually healing, when you've been through trauma, your life and your consciousness and your heart and your relationships, they go wide. And there's a very good life possible for you. So never fear. Healing feels good. Healing is fun. And especially with other people who are healing too. Okay, so I can't take this feeling of obsessing over him. Don't take it. Stop it. And thinking I could finally be with a nice person just to go through the same thing. It doesn't ever have to be this bad again if you get into a serious program of healing.
A disorganized attachment style is a trauma wound that can drive you to long for love and then push it away again and again. Every time you feel irritated or vulnerable or disappointed, it triggers you to do it. Childhood trauma is almost always the cause of this, and that wasn't your fault. But when you need to manage your well-being by constantly breaking up with someone and then trying to get them back, you're creating chaos and instability, and almost certainly you're giving them trauma wounds in the process. The push and pull generates a trauma bond, where a previously happy and strong person gets so weakened by the emotional abuse, they can't seem to stay away. Can 2 people swirling in this cycle ever change? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Sabrina, and she writes, "Hey, Fairy. My childhood was tumultuous with a mentally ill sister who was very violent and parents that were distracted trying to manage her. They were emotionally numb, no ability to say, I love you, I'm sorry, or show feelings." All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on here in Sabrina's life. She says, "I was not allowed to cry, and any talk of feelings was shut down. My mother was extremely controlling and verbally abusive to me and my dad. I was very much ignored. I was the youngest, but expected to be the adult. I began drinking at 8 or 9. Woo! It seemed like the answer to all my problems. I no longer cared about the chaos and violence at home. I always began to run away, which is something I do to this day, but in different ways, such as breakups and leaving when I feel triggered. I'm 10 years sober now, and I finally feel ready to have a healthy relationship." All right, so my question is, how do I know when to give up on a relationship? I have tons of fear and a difficult time trusting my instincts, since it feels like my instincts always say, run. I began dating Bob long distance 3 years ago. Of course, I would pick someone physically and emotionally far away, since that didn't terrify me as much as someone available due to my fear of commitment, fear of picking the wrong one again. When we started, he was very into me. I was scared and pushed him away. I would get fear, break up with him, run. So after 6 months of the off and on, he said, I can't keep dealing with you breaking up with me and blocking me. So basically every time I got my feelings hurt, which was frequent since I'm hypervigilant about protecting myself from abuse. So at that point, I made a decision to grow up. I told him I really wanted the relationship and I stopped breaking up with him as much. It was still off and on, but somewhat improved. Examples of why I would break up were things like him canceling plans last minute. He can get a temper in arguments and yell, and him being emotionally unavailable, just like my parents. So finally, I feel all in, and it seems like at that point, he quit trying. He tells me he sort of gave up because of the frequent breakups pushing him away, but he didn't give up enough to stop the cycle of off and on. Yeah, that's often what happens. The more I tried to be open, the more he shut down, it seems. But when I couldn't take anymore and broke up with him, he would always come back. I wonder if he's addicted to rejection. So finally, he decided not to come back only because he was dating someone new, but that didn't last. So by the time he came back, I decided to go no contact. I didn't speak to him 6 months while he sent about once a month texts trying to initiate conversation, which were ignored. Okay, during this time, I missed him and hoped no contact would eventually help me get off the merry-go-round and move on. It didn't seem to work. Okay. I really wanted an apology for him dumping me in the end, which felt like abandonment. What? Okay, we're going to come back to that. Especially since my son lost his father at the end of the relationship, and I reached out to Bob for support, but he didn't check in on me again for 3 days, and rarely after that. My son was grieving his father, and that was intensely hard for both of us. I thought in a time like that, Bob would put the relationship crap aside and just be a supportive friend like so many others were. I feel so fortunate to be a part of a 12-step program, and I was overwhelmed at the love and support from so many people during that awful time. Well, yeah. So after 6 months of no contact, I finally got an apology, sort of, a text that said I effed up. Not a man of many words. I took the bait and chatted with him, and then we decided to see each other. We talked like old friends, and it was great. He began asking me to dinner 3 or 4 times a week and taking me to do activities that seemed like dates. Finally, I asked, "Are you trying to date me?" And he replied, "I'm not ready to date." I said, "Okay, just checking. You are taking up a lot of time, and I don't think I should see you so much. I need to date other people." He didn't like that and said he just had fear, but he wanted to date. So we began a relationship. Somehow I knew that was coming. He finally agreed to go to couples counseling, and I was shocked at his change and growth. Couples counseling was very hard, and we talked maybe too much about the past, and we only made it to 3 sessions before he broke up with me. He came back quickly, and this has been a cycle. Now he breaks up with me all the time instead of me. I realize writing this sounds insane. Yes. And it's clear it's not healthy. My issue is he has shown progress, as I have. We're equally responsible for the dysfunction. I'm circling, but it's dysfunction. I have difficulty with trust issues, mainly believing he loves me. He says he loves me, and he shows it through kindness, support, and quality time, except when he doesn't, because when he's dysregulated, he's completely shut down. I just don't know when it's time to give up. He says he sees us getting married, and I recently found out he bought a ring, but then chickened out, telling my friend he decided it's not the right time. I would love to have a life with him, but we can't even stay together long enough to complete therapy. We recently started going again, and he walked out of a session halfway through. I don't think he has any ability to regulate once he's triggered. I'm triggering for him because I can be bossy, demanding, and needy. He says he's willing to do therapy and whatever it takes, but this is exhausting. It's affecting my sleep, my work, my ability to be a present mom. Woo. What do you do when you aren't sure if you should try harder or move on? We do not live together, and his busy schedule is a topic of arguments since he doesn't have more than a couple of days per week for me. When he's trying to win me back, after me saying I can't do this anymore, his schedule magically opens up for me. He definitely has CPTSD and is slightly coming out of denial about the healing he needs. He has a great heart, is a great dad to his son, and has shown a ton of improvement as far as growing and better mental health. Please offer any advice, and I'm open to tough love, so give it to me straight. All right, Sabrina. Yeah, this sounds insane. That's all. It sounds insane. And I'll tell you why I think so. For reasons you know. All right, you gave your background. Your parents were cold to you and numb, and you were ignored. So you you had the kind of background that is common for somebody who turns out to have avoidant attachment, or worse, disorganized attachment, where you want the relationship and you try for it, and getting rejected makes you run and grab it, but having it makes you reject it. And I can't help but wonder that now that this boyfriend or ex of yours is, running away from you, that's the only thing that's got you there. And if he would stay present and say, no, I'm really into you and I want to be together, you would find a way to go. I didn't hear anything in what you were saying that some radical change had happened. And I think attachment wounds can be very hard to heal. And the people who do heal them are very serious about not just their healing, but about recognizing their own role. I'm going to go to a tough love zone here. This is emotional abuse. When you break up with somebody over and over again, or you say, well, it's not as bad, I don't break up with them as often, you are an emotional abuser. And I need to say that straight out. I think it is best for this guy to get out of this relationship. I don't know what he is. He's not writing the letter and giving us his perspective. I can see from his behavior that he's trauma bonded with you, at least, that he didn't start out this way, but now he holds on and he feels terrified for the whole thing to end. But he's trying to hold a boundary with you. And maybe he's avoidant too. Maybe he's disorganized attachment. Whatever he is, let's focus on you, because you're the one who wrote the letter. So you have a kid. And what I thought was off base for you was to say that he owes you an apology because he broke up with you. And maybe you lived a life that demonstrated your contrition for breaking up with him again and again and there's just no doubt when somebody gets dumped again and again, it will start to trauma bond them and make them crave to stay together and put up with this terrible treatment. But no doubt it hurts them. And I would encourage you to go ahead and let that in, that your behavior is very hurtful. I would say you don't belong in a relationship with anybody until you have very clear perspective on this from maybe a 12-step group like Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, maybe therapy, also maybe my program, to really take seriously that you have a problem that hurts people and hurts children. And so all the drama in your life from having an unstable relationship, it does affect your kid. I encourage you, not to just displace all the blame and say, well, he just has all these problems, he needs therapy. I think you do, and that's the person who you can take to therapy is you. But for your kid's sake, a child needs to see their parent be strong and have boundaries. And if they happen to witness you falling apart or being in a difficult relationship, the best thing that can happen is they get to see you get your act together and not do that anymore. So not in a million years would I suggest you stay in this relationship. It sounds really, really toxic. It's now two people who are engaging in this behavior and it never goes well. And then there's talk of marriage, it makes no sense. I don't doubt that you have feelings for each other, but that is what develops when in a trauma bond, is it feels like this incredibly passionate love. Love is a verb. When you love someone, you don't cause them to feel abandoned just, for tiny reasons. That is not love. And I understand you have trauma and you can't help it right now. I do feel the most responsible thing for you is to not be in a relationship and to spend all that energy you would spend in a relationship working on this and seeing if you can change your pattern. It's so important that you do. You wouldn't want your kid to pick this up, and they do. They have a funny way of adopting our patterns, even when we think they don't get it or they're not paying attention. But they feel it in their nervous system. It feels familiar to them, when they recognize that feeling of all the colors of being in a trauma bond relationship. I love you, get away, all of that. So yeah, it may not be what you wanted to hear. And this thing about he should have stuck around for your child's sake. I think you should not be in a sick relationship for your child's sake. And there's something odd there, the way you're putting the responsibility on him, that he should be there and you can be friends through all of this. That sounds like, I can imagine, when your ex died, I can imagine that you just sort of wanted all hands on deck and it was very painful and you wanted that to be there for your son. But trust me, the instability of his presence in his life, in your kids, I said him, I don't know if it's a him or her actually. But the instability created by somebody who comes and goes is not a good thing. And so you had asked, how do you know when it's time to shut the door? You know it now. It's time. And you can do it gracefully. You don't have to do it with any kind of condemnation or contempt. It's just not healthy. You can set your boundary and try not to play games with it. And ending a relationship means you no longer are friends. You don't have contact. You two have a terrible track record of friendship and really bad boundaries around it. And so it may be that you never can be. And I know that's sad. I know it's sad. Like, people you're close to are hard to find. But the sooner you get disentangled from this toxic relationship, the faster you can heal from your own, ways, from your own difficulty relating to another person in a peaceful and loving way. And as you develop that, then good things can start to happen and your life will repopulate with great people. But sometimes it's a period of aloneness, and I hope you're brave enough to do it. Set this man free. Just set him free. Even if he argues with you, he needs to not be in a toxic relationship just as much as you do.
You don't always know it when you've gotten trapped in the sticky web of a romantic manipulator. You don't know it while it's happening, and it takes a while to hit you. And usually after you've been knocked off the emotional roller coaster that you were riding, that you were clinging to, and then the relationship is over, and that's when it begins to dawn on you that everything they said was designed to get you to trust them, to open up. Because that gave the romantic manipulator a feeling they liked. They liked the power, they liked the intensity, they liked the romance. But when that feeling wears off for them, it's like, they're done. They got what they want and they're done. And if you grew up with abuse and neglect, this is probably a dynamic that you found yourself in more than once. Someone shows up in your life, and they pressure you at first to get all into them, to come close, and then they start pushing you away, and they pressure you to put up with that, to get comfortable over there. And we can blame those people all we want, but if this is happening in your life, it's not going to stop until you stop it. You can't give them all the power to make that decision about whether they get to treat you that way. And it usually happens to people because they were conditioned in childhood to pull really close and then get pushed away or neglected or criticized. And then everybody had to act like nothing happened, like that's just fine. And being really good at that, skilled in that way, putting up with bad treatment and acting like, oh, it's okay, it in turn conditions you to put up with and even be attracted to romantic manipulators. And you'll find yourself giving more, trying to change yourself, trying to make them happy, living with a constant level of fear and shame, just grinding you down, because that's what it's like when manipulators are holding you at arm's length, taking what they want this way, but feeling no accountability toward you and somehow getting cooperation from you. So I want to help you learn to recognize manipulation for what it is. And when you know what it is, it takes all the magic out of it. And you see it for what it is, a big downward spiral that you're not going to fall into anymore. Okay, so here are 10 things to listen for when you're dating someone, to tell if someone is trying to manipulate you romantically. All right, number 1, you're too jealous or you're too possessive. So how many times have you been accused of this when someone you were in love with was hanging out with, or maybe sleeping with, or at least flirting with, and leading on other people? Now, jealousy is the natural emotion that rises up when you have a sexual and romantic bond with someone and your heart's desire to just be with that person. There's a desire there to be monogamous for most people. And if that's you, contrary to what romantic manipulators say, it's okay to want and expect monogamy. Now, you may have sold yourself short on what you want because maybe you rushed into the relationship and intellectually you can't make that kind of claim on another person who you don't really know yet and who hasn't made that commitment to you. But when you find yourself feeling jealous, it doesn't mean the jealousy is crazy. It means the speed of getting into the relationship caused you to bond with that person before the relationship could support that kind of a bond. And you might find yourself in a casual relationship or a friends with benefits kind of arrangement because that's what the other person wants, but it was never what you wanted. And to make that work for them, you go along with them, and you even blame yourself along with them for your jealous feelings. And you try to deny those feelings, and you make yourself bad and wrong for having them.
moving forward with a relationship when you're in conflict with yourself at that profound level, like wanting with all your heart to have a stable, committed love, and then trying to basically kill that part of you, thinking, as only a trauma kid can, that if you can just destroy your need for real love and have no expectations, then somehow things will transmogrify this person disrespecting you, and they'll realize at last that they love you. Has that ever worked for you? I don't think so. And this reminds me of number 2 of the things that romantic manipulators want you to believe. And this has to do with the idea of expectations and the toxic idea that there's something wrong with expectations. Now, manipulators tell you your expectations are unreasonable, they're unattractive, they're too bourgeois, they're uncool, they're too American, or whatever the European version of that is, or South American, or wherever you live. Meaning it's too boring, it's pedestrian, it's unhip. Or they tell you you're being too much of a woman, or you're being too much of a guy, as if that's something you should destroy in yourself so that they can feel comfortable. Okay, number 3, romantic manipulators have this amazing talent for thinking that they told you they were dating someone else. But I don't know, I guess you didn't hear them, right? Have you had that happen to you? And to be honest, we can be kind of unable to hear what we don't want to hear when we fall in love with someone. And our trauma brain is determined to make it work no matter what. And I don't think romantic manipulators are necessarily scouting for people who will put up with them. They just act selfishly and not totally honestly, like telling you they thought you knew they were dating someone else. And if you're still hanging on to them, they take that as consent to keep going. Now, your trauma brain will believe that this hammer blow to your heart just came out of nowhere, and it'll look for rationalizations why there's still hope, and they didn't really mean it, and maybe you can change them, and maybe you are too pedestrian or American or female or whatever. You'll attack yourself rather than see it. But the good thing about seeing how you're complicit in treating you badly is that when it's you, it means you can change it. You can stop doing it. The 5th thing is a variation on, I thought you knew I was dating someone, which is, I never suggested those plans I suggested and that you were looking forward to. Anyone who does this bullshits you about big things you're counting on, like plans that were made or whether they're already in a relationship. That's not good for you. You can set a boundary on that, but the boundary means you walk away from it, right? Getting all mad at somebody who does that, it's a retroactive strategy to set a boundary. So when someone does that to you, you just step away. Just step away. Now, the one hope that somebody who treats you casually like that is going to come around, it's going to happen because you simply didn't cling to the relationship after bad treatment. And in a few rare cases, people will come around and they'll step up to a higher level. All right. So the 5th thing, romantic manipulators love to use new age ideas to make you think that when you feel like something is a lie or that it's morally wrong or it's not sitting right with you, that it's really just you being spiritually unevolved. And they do this with things like, hey, you're not being in the moment. And that's what they pull out when you're talking about a lie that happened in the past or a need to know what the plan is in the future or what their intentions are. And yes, you're not in the moment because yes, you're thinking of the big picture and trying to get information about whether it makes sense for you to be there, whether it fits into your plans. So don't let them talk you out of allowing the past and the future to be subjects of conversation because they're real. That's what real people need to talk about. The 6th thing is very similar, and it's, hey, you're too much in your head. You need to be in your body. And this comes up when you do that thing they hate, which is called thinking. Using your powers of reason to notice red flags is a very important thing to be able to do. Assessing whether being in your body or specifically letting them have access to your body without using some thought is actually really dangerous for you. So of course you want to be using your thinking. Now, when you hesitate to have casual sex, you'll also hear people say, you're overthinking it. But really the problem might be that they're underthinking it. And thinking is how you state boundaries. So remember, thinking is good. Expressing yourself is good. Now, the seventh thing is when these very sophisticated historical anthropologists who happen to be romantically manipulative say very matter-of-factly that people aren't really designed for monogamy. It's a construct. It's American. Boy, these Americans again, huh? It's patriarchy. It's female control strategy. It's religious domination. It's capitalism. It's puritanical repression and blah, 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 blah. Monogamy is what you want. What that really means when they counter that against you is that the person in front of you doesn't want monogamy. And they're just projecting that it's everybody else. And they want to manipulate you into suppressing that desire that you have for a committed relationship. They want to make you feel like you're doing something bad, that you need to get over it. So just take them at face value when they say stuff like that and hear it for what it is. They are not monogamous. And if monogamy is what you want, that's a good thing to know about them and a good reason to not date that person. You don't want the same thing. Now, the eighth thing is giving you platitudes that are designed to smooth over and bury observations that maybe you're being romantically manipulated, saying things that pretend to be profound but are really totally meaningless. I've always hated these things. It's all good, you know. It's not all good. It's all good. It is what it is. Those two statements just don't say anything. And when you have an important question like, did you sleep with someone else last night? And you get this, hey, you're too much in your head, you know, get in the moment because it's all good. And anyway, it is what it is. Just don't go into denial. Don't be placated because what you're hearing means, yes, they did. And the ninth thing that romantic manipulators try to tell you is that they try to re-explain your feelings to you. Like, oh, you're asking if I'm open to marriage, but what you're really feeling is that your dad abandoned you when you were small, and you're just putting this huge expectation on me that you're going to get all your needs met by one person when people were never meant for that. And why can't you just be cool? The cool girl again, or the cool guy, just put up with it. So here's the thing. You know how to spot manipulation. You know how to tell when you're not going to get what you want. And that is cool. All right. Finally, the 10th thing is, if anyone tells you that anything they're doing that hurts you is really healing for you, don't believe it. No one else heals you, and definitely they don't heal you by hurting you. Someone you're kind of dating who is never really honest with you, and now trauma bonding energy has you feeling trapped and scared to leave, that person, by the way, is not a mirror, and they're not a teacher. They're a jerk. You're not in this relationship to learn a lesson from the universe. You're in this relationship because trauma made it hard for you to avoid getting manipulated, and it probably gave you an abandonment wound that makes it hard to leave even when you know you need to do that. But you are in charge of your life. You get to have boundaries that keep out time wasters and energy drainers and anyone who wants to steal what's good and beautiful in you without giving anything back.